We have a book by Harryette Mullen called Sleeping in the Dictionary. It's a much-read book. It's a prize-winning book. It's extraordinary. And what we're going to do in the next few minutes is look at two pieces from that book. One, a prose poem, which is the title piece, Sleeping with the Dictionary, and one of the alphabetical, I would say, pieces, one of the poems, verse from the book. So let's start with the prose poem. First of all, it's called Sleeping with the Dictionary. What a funny title. Kamara, what does that suggest to you, even if you hadn't read anything, but somebody said to you, oh, I have a book. It's called Sleeping with the Dictionary. What do you think?
I think of someone cuddled up in their bed with a dictionary. That's the first thought. Mm-hmm. You want me to say my second thought?
Yeah. I mean, cuddled with the dictionary. Cuddled sounds a little innocent.
Well, I literally, that's what I first thought of. I literally thought of someone like just
falling asleep
with
while
a book.
reading it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We do that a lot.
Second
you
thought?
Want to say your second thought?
Having sex with a dictionary?
So, what does that...
Making love with a dictionary.
Fucking a dictionary. What does it mean to fuck a dictionary? What could it mean? Lily, I'll throw that over to you.
Well, I mean, I think it means that if you just translate like the things that we mean when we say that about like sleeping with another person, so it means like you know the dictionary really intimately. You feel sort of almost like you have the same access to the dictionary as you do to your own body. So like you just... And there's an erotic dimension to all of that. So
I want to get back to the erotics of language and of words, but what kind of person has a special relationship with a dictionary?
A writer, yeah.
A writer. Why? I mean, what is the writer is to the dictionary as what is to what? What kind of thing is a dictionary for a writer?
I want to say like construction worker to bricks or plumber to pipes.
Let's take the bricks.
Manual.
Let's take the bricks. Let's say a mason to bricks. So the writer is to the dictionary as a mason is to bricks. So what does that mean for the dictionary? It's the things that you build with poesis. You make with bricks. Words are bricks.
Yes.
You're making a thing, a structure.
Yeah, you're making a poem from the bricks.
Okay. Dave?
Like a sculptor with clay. I mean, there's more, and even more, Lily said the word intimate, and I think that characterizes this really well, because, and especially if we're talking about the parallel of a sculptor with clay, there's a very intimate relationship between the creator and the created.
Okay. Intimacy and words, Lily.
Well, see, I don't disagree with Dave and Kamara, but I think it's more the relationship of like, unless you're writing in a language that isn't your first language or a language you're very comfortable operating in, a dictionary is more like it is a reference tool. So it's like, I'm going to use this word, but I want to make sure it means what I think it means, or I want to make sure there isn't some hidden meaning I'm not in control of or I don't know about. So it's considered like an authority. So it's almost like consulting an instruction manual to do something that you mostly know how to do, but you want to make sure you didn't do it wrong.
So writers would seem to be the least in need of a dictionary, but you're saying, no, they need it because this is a way of doing what for them? Of affirming connotations, of etymologies.
Checking spelling before spell check.
Spelling. So why would the dictionary be a stimulating sedative? It's a phrase that she uses in this prose poem.
Well, taking the stimulating part of the stimulating sedative, if writing is your medium for art, that means you probably get some pleasure just from the writing of something, from like having an idea and putting words to it. So to have this amazing book that has all your favorite things in it, like all your words, your whole language is there, and there's something comforting and like exciting that if there's a word the idea of a dictionary being if there's a word you can think of and a word you use, it should be in the dictionary. That's why we or Oxford, whatever, adds all the weird like slang words that we sort of make up and that come into common usage to the dictionary. It's like we want it to reflect all of the things we use every day. So there's something exciting that whatever you want would be in there.
So now let's turn to the erotics of language. Halfway through this clever prose poem, which starts immediately with puns, right? I beg to dicker with my silver-tongued companion. It turns out that, in fact, the companion is the dictionary, whose lips are ready to read my shining gloss. There's a pun there. Where? Where's the pun?
Well, gloss could mean shining. Gloss makes me think of lip gloss, but a gloss is also my take on things. So
a gloss is in lexicographic, if that's the word, lexicography terms, a gloss would be a meaning, a definition, a connotation, a context, or a denotation.
Also, the idea that the lips of the dictionary are going to read her is kind of ironic too.
Yeah. Okay, but so we get a lot of punning at the beginning. I beg to dicker. I mean, we don't have to play with that much, as it were. But then halfway down, it really gets pretty hot, steamy, to go through all these motions and procedures, groping in the dark for an alluring word is the poet's nocturnal mission. Aroused by myriad possibilities. Okay, I guess we better pause on that one. Aroused by myriad possibilities. So let's theorize now about the erotics of language. When we say erotics of language, what do we mean? This is tough. Anybody want to try? Let's defer that for a second and talk about aroused by myriad possibilities.
We're talking about this, the way it gives us sensory stimulation. If that's what we're talking about, erotics of language, and that's what that's what comes to my mind. We're talking about being aroused and
like rhyming and alliteration and things like that that are just physically punning, things that stimulate this like basic human thing where we like language and we like being surprised by it, and the way that it physically sounds just like goes back to like a childhood like pride, and when you finally can say something that your parents understand, or you can finally summon something that you want.
You did it well, but you brought it back to the non-sexual by talking about the childlike happiness, pleasure. But now let's talk about arousal, desire. Why do the myriad possibilities of the dictionary create arousal? Why do possibilities, as opposed to finitudes and definiteness? First of all, let's talk about the myriad possibilities. What are the myriad possibilities here?
This is just an observation, but I think it's funny that this turn, when it talks about the big dictionary, and of all the words you could use to describe dictionary, she uses such a mundane word like big. And then we go on, to talk about the myriad possibilities.
There are so many words in here that seem like she learned them from her nightly readings with the dictionary, like dicker or hypnagogic or
But you guys are still somewhat avoiding my question. Aroused by myriad possibilities. Why would you be aroused? The myriad possibilities of the dictionary are, let's be plain here, they are
words, lots of words.
Big book, lots of words. There's all kinds of things. I mean, okay. And now, why would you be aroused by that? Be theoretical. What is it about desire?
There's something arousing about having options.
Yes, I mean, in the sexual sphere, right, the idea of desire, one desires what one doesn't have right now, one desires what one could have, but one desires openness and indefiniteness, and things that are finite and established seem to be less, at least immediately, desirous. Desire is about a lack, right? And if we want to do theories of language, language, of course, is the thing that substitutes for, words are the thing that substitutes for the thing. So pen, I've got the pen in its presence, but if I lack the pen, I have the word pen to do it. And the dictionary is like the most comprehensive set of lacks that there is.
It's like this sexual fantasy guide. It's got every fantasy in it that you could possibly
Exactly.
imagine.
So to go through all these motions and procedures, groping, so there's a word of the sexual act, the vocabulary of the sexual act, in the dark, for an alluring word, is the poet's nocturnal mission. There's a pun there, right? Do we want to say what the pun is?
I'm blushing.
You're blushing? Are you a large red man reading? The poet's nocturnal mission, so it's a pun on emission. And we try out the most perverse positions, so it's becoming jokey, punny, clever, right? Perverse positions, obviously sexual positions, in the practice, there's another word, of our nightly act, there's another word, the penetration, there's another word from the sexual vocabulary, of the denotative body, okay, another pun.
Well, perverse has perversion and verse going on too.
Lots of puns.
Yeah.
So why is she doing this? What point is she making about her relationship as a poet to the dictionary, to words, to these options? Let's go around. I want everybody on this before we look at an instance of one of the poems of this book, which I believe are enactments of this idea of the erotics of language. Lily?
Well, I don't think everybody feels this same way that Harryette Mullen feels about the dictionary. So, like, for some people, say you have, like, a troubled relationship with reading, like maybe you're not a great reader or something. Like, the dictionary can sort of be your, like, unfortunate crutch that you have to lean on, but you kind of hate, you have a love-hate relationship
Never
with
take it
something.
to bed.
You would never, but and if you're someone who constantly feels like what you're trying to say isn't included in the dictionary, like maybe you're just frustrated with it, but she's saying, rather than reject rules and definitions, let's like take them into bed with us and work together with them, or find what we can find sexual and like desirous about them, rather than like either reject and try to make a whole new language. Let's like take what works and see what we like about it.
Good, that's a great start. Kamara, what do you think about this?
I'm thinking about how I'm blushing now too. You can't tell that. I don't know. I'm thinking about how
You're a poet. What
Yeah.
why? So she's in a way a poetry nerd and proud of it. She's saying,
Yes.
the dictionary is like, what? This is like, I don't need a lover. I got my dictionary. There's a certain almost Dickinsonian independence about this kind of love, you know?
Yeah, I think it's sort of it's a pride thing. She wants people to feel triumphant about this.
Yeah.
About being like, yo, I can take my dictionary to bed and it's gonna be fun.
It's going to be fun. Dave?
I'm not sure where to go with this exactly, but she talks about the dictionary and she likens it a lot to the bed. So that would mean that what's in the dictionary is what's in the bed. So she equates herself with all of these infinite meanings, these myriad possibilities too.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we could talk a lot more about that prose poem, and I'm sure we'll go back to it, but let's take a look at one of the poems in the book. It's called Any Lit, and it's one of the more alphabetically conscious poems. In a way, this evinces what is sometimes called an Abecedarianism. An Abecedarian poem is an alphabetical poem of some kind. It doesn't range across the alphabet. How is it structured?
Well,
Go ahead, Kamara.
okay, well the first noun in the poem is some type of U word. U starting with a U, U starting with an EU or a Y. The second noun,
Ukulele, Yukon, Union, Unicycle, Universe.
Yugoslavia.
So it begins with a Y or a U in this case of Union, which has that sound, that consonant-like sound, and then Eucharist, EU. Okay, so you have that.
The second noun starts with a my, M-I sound, Y sound, something like that.
And why? Why do it? Lily, why is she doing this?
I had two thoughts. So, like, I really like this in this book of poems that's about sleeping with the dictionary. Almost, you could think of it as like queering the dictionary, or just making the dictionary work for you, or something. So it's like, like.
When you say queering the dictionary, that's, I think, a totally appropriate phrase. But what do you mean by that?
Meaning, she's not in. As we saw from, if we take that first, the Sleeping with the Dictionary prose poem as almost like a frame for the rest of the collection, or like a what the rest of the summary of almost like the process of the rest of the
It's like an
collection.
ars poetica.
Yeah,
in a way,
thanks. Yeah, that was the word I was, the concept I was trying to get. But it's a more, you don't have to accept it just the way that it's like delivered. You can find a different approach to it, or a way that isn't quite direct. Like she's sleeping with the dictionary isn't going to be just a list of dictionary definitions as you would find them in the dictionary. It's like the dictionary with some of Harryette Mullen in it, like all mixed together. So I think this poem organizes words in a way that really makes more sense. If you think of like, if you ever talk to like children who are first learning how to spell, these are all words that they would probably spell with the letter Y, probably because that's the sound that they make. And so they're organized phonically or soundly, so according to sound, rather than alphabetically, which is how things are supposed to be organized in the dictionary.
They're not organized alphabetically, though they seem to be. They're organized phonically, as you say. So in this book, we have poems that are made of word games. Excuse me, we have poems that are acrostics, we have poems that are anagrams, we have poems that are homophones, that are based on homophonic puns, we have poems that are just puns. We even have poems that are inspired by the famous N+7 Oulipo, that's Oulipo, the French experimental poetry group founded in 1960. The Oulipian idea of N+7, which, Lily, is what?
That's where you take an existing poem or text, and usually you just do this to the nouns in the poem, but you could do it to any of the words. You take the word and you look it up in the dictionary and you replace it with whatever word you find 7 entries below or 7 entries above that word in the dictionary. So
and the result is...
the result is something that sounds almost like the original product or the original poem, but isn't quite it. So you take something that often could be like a cliched piece of writing or a tired piece of writing, and you introduce some elements of like random elements, because it's kind of random. It's not completely random because it's alphabetically organized, whatever, in the dictionary, but a word that doesn't belong there, and you just create a whole new sense of meaning within the original boring, tired text.
So you deform what the expected words would be by using your dictionary to randomly come up with different words. So in this case, we have a kind of substitution going. What is the kind of line or the kind of sentence that was originally there to be deformed? You are a blank beyond my blank. What kind of sentence is that, Dave?
There is an expression that says, you are a huckleberry beyond my persimmon.
And what does that mean? Persimmon?
Persimmon.
Yeah. What does that mean?
It means you are something a little bit better, one step beyond.
And in what context is that phrase, that line used?
I read that it was related to an African-American courtship ritual, but
It's a courtship ritual.
I'm not sure. But
So if it's a courtship ritual, what's it? Let's be flat about it. Let's be basic about it. If this phrase were conventionally deployed by her, she'd be saying something like, "You're my cutie pie," right? You're right.
My better half.
You're my better half. I would swim every ocean, climb every mountain. It's an endearment. Okay, she runs it many times over, substituting you sounds, you or you, and then mi sounds. What is the result? We're going to look at it closely in a minute, but what is the result of that? Instead of using that conventional phrase, what's the result?
Well, the further you go, the more iterations of this form. I'm calling it a formula, which isn't really fair, but like same setup. The further you go along towards the end of the poem, the less you pay attention to the words themselves, and the more you start to hear them just phonically as sounds. So the result is that the sentence, if you abstracted from the more specific words, would sound like you are a you beyond my me or my.
Yeah.
You are a you beyond my.
Yeah, which is really beautiful.
How would that work out?
Well, it's just a really beautiful abstraction from, it's like the lovey-dovey sentence. Like,
Yes.
it's...
So you are a you. Let's say it's you.
right, like I respect your subjectivity as outside of
You are a
me.
subject beyond my me.
Yeah,
I love you as a subject.
right.
I'm interested in you as a subject. It's like the greatest thing you could say to somebody. But what she does is she says it through a series of repetitions of saying that. So rather than saying, you are a you beyond my me, you are a you beyond my me, oh, you are a you beyond my me, you are a you beyond my me, she just fills it out with random words, presumably from the dictionary. All right, Kamara, would you read the first, I don't know, 6 lines or so?
Mm-hmm. You are a ukulele beyond my microphone. You are a Yukon beyond my Micronesia. You are a union beyond my meiosis. You are a unicycle beyond my migration. You are a universe beyond my mitochondria. You are a Eucharist beyond my Miles Davis.
Now, Lily suggested to us, I think correctly, that after a while, we had you read the whole poem, we would begin only to hear those sounds, and we would lose a sense of the gesture of this phrase that actually hardly means anything. But we are tempted to create a connection between the apparently arbitrarily chosen you sound and me sound. So can anyone make any sense of the relationship between ukulele and microphone?
Yeah, I don't think these are chosen randomly at all.
So how are they chosen? We don't know, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're carefully chosen because when I was reading this, I was impressed by how many words with the same sounds she could employ together to say some very powerful things.
What does she say? Give us an example of a powerful thing that she says.
My favorite one is, you are a Euclid beyond my miter box.
And what does that mean?
Euclid is the father of geometry. He invented the ways to calculate, two-dimensional, three-dimensional planes.
Right.
A miter box is something more practical. It's a box that you put that has grooves on different angles for saws that you use to make precise cuts on something like molding.
When you're creating a 90-degree angle, you need a miter box to create that angle, so you're using geometry.
Right, and the father of geometry is, she's saying, you are the father of geometry beyond my
miter box.
Yeah, I think that's powerful.
Okay, any others?
I like you are a universe beyond my mitochondria because mitochondria is like the teeniest, tiniest expression of
life,
your world
I think,
and of life. And the universe is obviously the biggest possible thing that we can conceive of. So it's, I love that it explodes those scales to the point where it's completely useless to compare them, and yet somehow sort of beautiful.
So it's, I want to do a few more of these, but let me generalize for a minute. So it is a very soundy poem that is riffing off an African-American aphorism, which is about affection, undoes that or redoes that by using sound to the point where we hear subjectivity, you are a you beyond my me, and yet it does so in a way through a real kind of experimental deployment of words from a dictionary that actually makes a lot of sense, ethical sense, political sense. So it's doing those two things at once, which, by the way, is what I like my poetry to do. Just to speak personally now, poetry gives me pleasure because it's doing the sound thing and the semantic thing at the same time. So I bought you a little time to think about some other phrases. Which
I have one.
You have one?
You are a union beyond my meiosis. I really like that one. Meiosis is the splitting of cells and creating babies, right, basically? So I like this idea because beyond this splitting process, basically, and creation of babies, if she's talking sexually
Sleeping with the dictionary, yeah.
This togetherness is more important than the splitting.
Yeah, so you are a subject beyond myself, beyond my narcissism. You are the cause for convergence beyond any splitting, any cellular splitting. Very nice. Dave, got another one?
You are a euthanasia beyond my miasma.
Explain miasma.
Noxious fumes. It was before germ theory when people thought that illness was carried from bad, stale air. And the thing that trumps that is a mercy killing.
Yeah, mercy killing. Lily, you got one?
Yeah, I really like you are a youth beyond my mylar. That one's the one that's closest to the you and the me for my root words. But I love that because like mylar makes me think of like mylar balloons and seems like a very specific childhood memory, and youth is like the more general concept. But like when you most frequently, I feel like when you have a life partner or someone that you're with for a long time, you didn't actually know them when they were young, at least not as young as she's describing here. So it's kind of cool. Like, we know each other so well that we can pretend, like, reach back into that time before we knew each other, and somehow you have become my youth.
You are a ubiquity beyond my minority. Anybody want to try that one? You are ubiquity, sameness all around, ever present, beyond my minority status, beyond my separateness, beyond my distinctiveness. You are a eugenics beyond my Mayan, capital M. Anybody want to try that? What is eugenics?
That one seems like some of these are not as like sweet and positive as the original sort of base.
Let's see if we can turn that into positive. Can we?
Okay. Well, so eugenics is about control of. Not everyone in the population should be allowed to breed or have children. It should be controlled based on like achieving a purity of race or the best possible characteristics.
Right. Eugenics can lead to genocide.
Sure, and even just the idea that like a lot of science fiction is based on this idea too, that like eventually as a society will converge in this, like on this idea that only the most fit should actually be allowed to have children. But Mayan is referring to like a Mayan society, saying my Mayan is kind of funny. She could mean like my Mayan ancestry, or she could mean, if that was true of her, or she could mean like my understanding of who the Mayan people were, or she could mean things in my world that I use that were invented by the Mayans and somehow like we still use them even though it's like centuries and centuries later.
It's a tough one.
I don't know. It seems pretty...
So you could go on doing this with each line, creating this. They're almost like new sentences if you think about Harryette Mullen in the context, maybe loosely, of the language poets. They almost like new sentences where you're constantly having to work with juxtapositions. So let's get final words on this. The experience of sleeping with the dictionary, of reading this work, of encountering this playful Abecedarianism, this kind of poet seduction of language. Final thoughts. Lily, what do you think?
I just really empathize with, I think the way that we're taught to learn how to read and write is that the dictionary becomes our enemy or becomes this like weight that holds us down and like sinks us. And I love this refiguring of how writers can use the dictionary where they're not beholden to some higher power that says this is what this word means. And she kind of proves it with Any Lit, where she organizes things. She draws from the dictionary, but she's not beholden to its organizational structure because she's organizing things phonically, which when she's talking about love or expressing love, maybe that just is the organization that made the most sense to her or whatever. So I really empathize with that, like that gesture from a poet of like what your relationship to the dictionary and the rules of writing and grammar can be.
Thank you. Kamara, final thoughts?
She kind of made me look at the dictionary a little differently because a lot of, like, I look at the dictionary to find that perfect word, right? Like you scroll through and you're like, not really, maybe, not really. But to look at the other words around it, I think is what I've kind of learned from this experience. Look at the options, and the possibilities are a good thing.
And they're sexy and exciting.
And sexy, exciting, funny.
Aroused by myriad possibilities. Dave, final thought?
Lily touched on this, but I can read Sleeping with the Dictionary as sort of like her approach, her manifesto, and Any Lit as one of the many fantasies that she's talking about, one of the examples of it.
And my final word is simply about the title of the poem that we looked at, Any Lit. Any Lit. I mean, let me riff on that for a second, or maybe you can help me. Any Lit? Lily, Any Lit?
Well, so it feels like lit makes me think short for literature is my first thought. So like any fill in, you are a fill in a use, any you sound beyond my sound. So any word with those sounds fits in this poem and completes this analogy.
Perfect. So to me, anti-lit is empowering, it's positive, it's an affirmation, right? It partly says what Bernadette Mayer says when she encourages people just to write. She gives you a list of experiments and you can do it. This book is full of procedures and constraints that feel freeing rather than constraining. You can write something. You can spin off something from the dictionary. You needn't be intimidated by the myriad possibilities. In fact, quite opposite. You can be aroused by them. You can generate. You can be generative. You can reproduce. You can split cells and create a union at the same time.